Hey guys, tonight we begin with something different from the usual tales of conquest and glory. We're stepping away from the battlefield and into the daily life of families who lived at the very edge of the Roman world, Hadrian's Wall. Not the soldiers themselves, but their wives, their children, the people who waited and worried and somehow built lives in one of the empire's most unforgiving outposts. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Introduction. Life at the edge of empire. Imagine living at the edge of the known world, your husband a soldier and danger lurking just beyond a massive stone wall. What was life really like for the families of Roman legionaries at Hadrian's Wall? We're peeling back the centuries to reveal the untold domestic stories, the surprising daily routines, and the quiet sacrifices made far from Rome's comforts. This isn't about grand battles or political intrigue. This is about ordinary people, mostly women and children, trying to build something resembling normal life in one of the most abnormal places imaginable. Forget the battlefields for a moment. Step into a small, bustling Roman home at the frigid northern frontier. This isn't about gladiators. It's about the everyday struggles and triumphs of a family whose fate was tied to the might of the Roman Empire, yet whose hearts beat within the confines of a modest household right next to Hadrian's Wall. Prepare to experience their world. Now, here's where we need to establish some historical context, because the families living at Hadrian's Wall weren't just random civilians who happened to end up at the frontier. Understanding who they were and how they got there matters. It shapes everything about their daily experience. When Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of his famous wall in 112 CE, the Roman Empire was at its greatest extent. But extension creates problems. The further you spread, the harder it becomes to maintain control, and northern Britain was about as far from Rome as you could get while still being inside imperial borders. The wall wasn't just a military fortification, it was a statement this far and no further. The legionaries who built the wall, 80 miles of stone and turf running coast to coast across northern Britain, didn't do so alone. They needed support, supplies, and services. Enter the vicus, the civilian settlement that grew up outside every Roman fort like mushrooms after rain. Merchants, craftsmen, innkeepers, prostitutes, and yes, families. Lots of families. Here's what might surprise you. Officially, Roman soldiers weren't allowed to marry during their service. That rule stayed on the books until Emperor Septimius Severus changed it in 97 CE. But rules and reality have never been particularly friendly with each other, and the reality at Hadrian's Wall was that soldiers formed relationships, had children, and created families regardless of what Roman law said about it. These weren't legal marriages, which created all sorts of complications we'll explore. But they were marriages in every way that mattered to the people involved. The woman grinding grain before dawn wasn't a soldier's companion or servant in her own mind. She was his wife. The children weren't legally recognized by Rome, but they were absolutely recognized by their father, their mother, and the community around them. So who were these women? Some were local Britons who'd formed relationships with Roman soldiers. Others had followed the legions from other provinces, Gaul, Germany, even as far as Syria or North Africa. The army moved, and families moved with it, creating a strange diaspora of military dependents scattered across the empire's frontiers. Picture this. You're a woman from southern Gaul. You've formed a relationship with a legionary, maybe back when his unit was stationed near your home. He gets transferred to Britain. Do you stay behind, never seeing him again? Or do you undertake a journey of hundreds of miles, to foreign lands, across dangerous waters, to follow him to the edge of the world. For those who remember crossing the Atlantic in the 1940s or 50s, you'll understand something of what that journey meant. Except these ships were smaller, slower, and far less safe. The crossing from Gaul to Britain could take days in good weather, longer in bad. And you made that journey not for vacation or opportunity, but for love, or at least for the stability that came with being attached to a Roman soldier. Once you arrived in Britain, the culture shock must have been profound. If you came from the Mediterranean, you'd traded sunshine for perpetual gray skies, traded wine for beer, traded olive oil for animal fat, traded marble buildings for timber and thatch. And if you came from anywhere civilized, you'd traded safety for constant, nagging danger. Because make no mistake, Hadrian's Wall was dangerous. The Picts and other tribes north of the wall didn't recognize Roman authority and had absolutely no qualms about raiding south when opportunity presented itself. The wall was a deterrent, not an impenetrable barrier. Families living in its shadow lived with the knowledge that violence could erupt at any moment. This wasn't theoretical danger, the kind you see on the evening news happening somewhere else. This was real, immediate, and personal. Your husband patrolled beyond the wall. Your neighbor's husband died in an ambush last month. That merchant's shop got burned in a raid 2 years ago. Everyone had stories, and none of them ended with, and then everything was fine. Yet, despite all this, the danger, the cold, the displacement, the legal limbo of their relationships, these families persisted. They built lives, they raised children, they created communities. They found ways to survive, and sometimes even to thrive, in circumstances that would break many of us today. That's what we're exploring tonight. Not the grand narrative of Rome's frontier policy, but the quiet, grinding, daily reality of people trying to make a home in a place that seemed designed to prevent such a thing. We'll walk through a typical day in the life of one such family. We'll call them Marcia, wife of Gaius Valerius Maximus of the 6th Legion, and their 2 children. Their story, reconstructed from archaeological evidence, historical records, and educated inference, gives us a window into a world that's simultaneously alien and deeply familiar. Because while the specifics have changed, the fundamental experience of family, of struggle, of hope, of endurance, transcends the centuries. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's step back nearly 2,000 years to a cold morning at Hadrian's Wall, where the sun rises late and sets early, where the wind never stops, and where Marcia is about to begin another day in a life that history largely forgot to record. Morning reveille, waking up on the frontier. Dawn at Hadrian's Wall arrives, not with trumpets or drama, but with cold. Not just cold penetrating, bone deep, the kind you can't escape cold that makes you question every decision that brought you to this place. Marcia wakes to it every morning, not because she wants to, but because her body can't sleep through the chill anymore. The blankets that felt adequate when she and Gaius fell asleep are now pitifully insufficient. Their combined body heat has leaked away through the hours, and now there's just cold pressing down from above and seeping out from below. The first sound of the day isn't her voice or her movement. It's the distant blast of a cornu from the fort, the morning trumpet call summoning soldiers to assembly. Even here, in the civilian settlement, a quarter mile from the fort's southern gate, you can hear it clearly in the still morning air. It's 4 hours before dawn, what the Romans called the 4th watch of the night. Gaius doesn't need the cornu. His body, trained by years in the legions, wakes him before the sound reaches their home. She feels him shift beside her, the sudden draft as he lifts the blankets confirming what she already knows. He's leaving. "Stay," she mumbles, knowing he won't, knowing she shouldn't ask. He doesn't answer. There's nothing to say that hasn't been said 1,000 mornings before. Instead, she hears him fumbling in the darkness for his undertunic, his wool socks, the leather straps of his armor. The sounds are as familiar as her own breathing by now. Marcia doesn't go back to sleep. Can't, really. Once you're awake in this cold, staying in bed just means lying there being cold while thinking about all the things you should be doing. So she pulls herself up, wraps the largest wool blanket around her shoulders like a cloak, and pads across the packed earth floor to the hearth. The hearth is the heart of the home, literally and figuratively. Get it going, and the day begins properly. Leave it dead, and you're facing hours of cold discomfort before you finally surrender and start from scratch with flint and steel. She's learned to bank the fire at night, covering the embers with ash to slow their burning so something survives until morning. Carefully, she brushes ash aside, searching for the telltale red glow. There, just barely alive. She feeds it dried grass, then twigs, coaxing it back to life with the patience born of practice. For those who remember the days before central heating, when keeping a fire going overnight meant the difference between waking to warmth or waking to frozen water pipes, you'll understand the small victory of finding live embers in the morning. For those who grew up even earlier, maybe helping your mother or grandmother with a wood stove on the farm, this is familiar territory. By the time small flames are licking at the kindling, Gaius is ready to leave. He comes to the fire, warms his hands briefly. Armor is cold metal against skin in this weather, and then he's gone. No kiss goodbye, no lengthy farewell. Just a hand on her shoulder, a squeeze, and then the sound of the door opening and closing. The cold that rushes in when he opens the door is like a slap. Even the few seconds of exposure are enough to set the fire dancing and wavering. Marcia pulls the blanket tighter and focuses on building up the flames properly. Outside, the settlement is coming alive in that distinctive way military communities do, not gradually, but in waves. The first wave is the soldiers themselves, all responding to the same trumpet call, all heading to the same assembly in the fort. Their footsteps, multiplied by hundreds, create a dull thunder that Marcia can feel through the packed earth floor. The second wave, following minutes later, is everyone else. The children who need feeding, the animals that need tending, the merchants who want to catch soldiers with their pay before they spend it elsewhere, the prostitutes ending their shifts, the bakers firing up their ovens, the inevitable chaos of hundreds of people trying to accomplish their own individual tasks in a limited space. Marcia isn't thinking about waves or patterns. She's thinking about water. Water doesn't come from a tap when you live in the Vicus. It comes from the fort's well, or from the stream that runs past the settlement's eastern edge, or, if you're unlucky, from wherever you can find it and hope it won't make you sick. Marcia has 2 large jugs for water storage. Both are nearly empty. This means one of her first tasks of the day, once the children are up and the fire is properly established, will be trudging to the well with empty jugs and trudging back with full ones. Each jug, when full, weighs close to 40 pounds. The well is a quarter-mile away. She'll make this trip at least twice today. Luxury, thy name is running water. From their corner, she hears movement. The children are waking. Her son, Marcus, first. He's always been an early riser, much to her occasional annoyance. Her daughter, Julia, will fight consciousness for another few minutes if allowed. "Marcus, get up properly and put on your tunic," she calls without looking. "Julia, you too. We're not heating the whole province for you to lie about in bed." Grumbling. The universal sound of children who don't want to face the day. It's the same grumbling you probably remember from your own children, or perhaps from yourself 60 years ago on cold winter mornings when the school bus was coming and the house hadn't warmed up yet. By the time both children are up and minimally dressed, the fire has taken the worst edge off the cold. Not made it comfortable. Let's not exaggerate, but made it bearable. The kind of cold where you stop seeing your breath inside, where your fingers start to work properly again, where the thought of taking off your blanket cloak doesn't seem like certain death. Marcia fills a clay pot with water from one of the jugs. Precious water, every drop accounted for, and sets it on the edge of the fire to heat. Breakfast will be simple. Barley porridge if she still has barley, bread if she managed to trade for some yesterday, and watered wine that's more water than wine. Outside, the settlement is in full morning bustle now. She can hear it even with the door closed, cartwheels in mud, someone's goat bleating incessantly, two merchants arguing about prices, children laughing or crying or both, and underneath it all, the constant background noise of hundreds of people living in close proximity. The sound is probably not unlike an army camp in Korea if you served there, or perhaps the overcrowded conditions some remember from immigrant neighborhoods in the 30s and 40s. That sense of too many people in too little space, everyone's business bleeding into everyone else's, whether you want it to or not. Marcus eats his porridge standing up, already shifting his weight from foot to foot with the restless energy of an 8-year-old boy. Julia takes smaller bites, still not fully awake, porridge dripping from her wooden spoon. "After you eat, you help me with water," Marcia tells Marcus. Not a question, a statement of fact. "Why can't?" he starts. "Because I said so," she cuts him off. Another phrase that transcends centuries. She's already mentally cataloging the day's tasks. Water first. Then the market to see if any merchants have eggs or cheese to trade. Then the endless domestic maintenance, mending, cleaning, preparing the next meal. If there's time, she needs to visit her neighbor Claudia, who's been sick. And at some point, she should check the vegetable garden plot behind the house, though given the season and the climate, she's not expecting miracles. This is the rhythm of life at Hadrian's Wall, not dramatic, not particularly interesting to anyone but those living it, but absolutely essential. Every day, thousands of small tasks need completing just to maintain basic existence. Fetch water, prepare food, maintain clothing and shelter, keep children alive and relatively clean, support your husband's military career in whatever ways you can. No one's writing these tasks down. No historian is recording that. On this particular morning in 35 CE, Marcia of the Vicus west of Mile Castle 37 woke before dawn, revived her fire, fed her children barley porridge, and prepared to fetch water. But these tasks happened every day, across the length of the wall, in hundreds of homes. They're the invisible foundation that made the visible empire possible. Those who remember the pre-war years, when women's work in the home was similarly unrecorded and unrecognized despite being absolutely essential, might recognize something of that dynamic here. The labor that makes everything else possible, but rarely gets mentioned in the history books. Before Marcia opens the door to face the morning bustle outside, she stops at the small household shrine set into the wall. The Lairs' protective spirits of the home look down from their niche. She makes a quick gesture, touches her fingers to her lips and then to the shrine, and murmurs a brief prayer. "Keep my children safe. Keep my husband safe. Keep this house standing." Simple requests, universal requests, the kind of prayers that have been whispered in every language, in every era, by everyone who loved someone or something worth protecting. Then she wraps her cloak tighter, picks up the empty water jugs, calls to Marcus to follow, and steps out into the gray British morning to begin the actual work of the day. Domestic duties and daily drudgery. The walk to the well is only a quarter mile, but in mud, carrying empty jugs that will soon be full, with a child in tow who stops to look at everything, it takes longer than you'd think. Marcus wants to know why the blacksmith's shop is smoking so much. Why that merchant is arguing with that woman. Whether he can stop to look at the new puppies behind the baker's house. All reasonable questions from an 8-year-old's perspective. all supremely inconvenient from his mother's perspective, when she just wants to get the water and get back before Julia sets something on fire or wanders off. "Keep walking, Marcus." How many times has she said that? How many times will she say it again? Parenthood is largely the repetition of the same instructions in different circumstances, hoping they eventually stick. The well is crowded when they arrive. It's always crowded in the morning. This is one of the main water sources for the entire Vicus, and everyone needs water. The scene is orderly chaos. Women waiting in a rough line that somehow isn't quite a line, children playing at the edges, occasional arguments about who was next, the rhythmic creak of the well's wooden frame as buckets are lowered and raised. Marcia knows most of the women here by sight, if not by name. That one's husband serves in the cavalry. That one lost her first husband to disease and remarried within a month. That one came from Syria and still wears her hair in the elaborate style of her homeland. That one is British, local, and speaks Latin with such a heavy accent that half the settlement can barely understand her. When it's finally Marcia's turn, she lowers the bucket, waits for the splash that confirms it's filled, and hauls it back up with the practiced efficiency of someone who's done this thousands of times. The rope cuts into her hands even through her calluses. The bucket, when it surfaces, is heavy and ungainly, water slopping over its edge. She pours from bucket to jug, careful not to waste a drop. Then again, 2 full jugs. Approximately 80 pounds of water to carry back home. Her arms will ache, her shoulders will ache. Tomorrow she'll do it again. Marcus, bless him, tries to help carry one of the jugs. He manages about 20 steps before having to set it down. The weight is just too much for his young frame. She doesn't scold him for trying. Trying is good, but she also doesn't pretend he's actually helping. She picks up both jugs herself and begins the walk back. If you've ever carried groceries from the store to your apartment in a city before, there were elevators, or hauled buckets of water for livestock on a farm, you'll have some sense of this. The difference is you probably didn't have to do it every single day, twice a day, with no days off, ever. Back home, Julia has managed not to burn the house down, which Marcia considers a victory. She's also managed to get into the honey jar, which is less of a victory. There's honey on Julia's face, honey on the storage chest, and probably honey in places Marcia hasn't discovered yet. Julia. One word. The tone says everything. "I was hungry," Julia offers, honey literally dripping from her chin. "Then you eat the bread I left for you, not our entire winter supply of honey." Those who raised children in the 40s and 50s, when you couldn't just pop to the supermarket for more of anything, might remember this particular flavor of frustration. Resources are limited. Waste isn't just wasteful, it's potentially dangerous. Honey is expensive. Honey is precious. Honey is meant to last until next summer's trade caravans arrive. And here's 5-year-old Julia, treating it like it's infinite. But you can't stay angry at a 5-year-old with honey on her face. Not for long, anyway. Marcia wipes Julia's face with a damp cloth, puts the honey jar back where it belongs, higher this time, and moves on to the next task. Which is, of course, more water. The daily domestic workload of a woman in the Vicus is staggering by modern standards. Cooking every meal from scratch, starting with raw ingredients, fetching all the water for cooking, cleaning, and washing. Maintaining all clothing and textiles through washing, mending, and occasional complete reweaving. Managing food storage to prevent spoilage. Keeping the fire going. Supervising children every moment they're awake because the environment is genuinely dangerous. And that's just the baseline. That's assuming nothing goes wrong. Add illness, or unexpected guests, or equipment failure, or any of 1,000 other complications, and the workload becomes crushing. Marcia's current task is washing Marcus's spare tunic. He only has 2, So if one is dirty, it needs washing immediately. The water is cold because heating large quantities for laundry is an expensive luxury she can't often afford. The soap is harsh, made from animal fat and wood ash, and it doesn't work particularly well. She scrubs the tunic against itself, trying to work dirt out of the weave, and hangs it to dry near the fire where it will take hours to dry completely and will smell faintly of smoke. Then there's mending. Always mending. Clothing in this era isn't mass-produced and easily replaced. Everything is handmade, expensive, and precious. When something tears, you fix it. When it wears through, you patch it. When the patches wear through, you cut it up and use the good parts to patch something else. Marcia has a bone needle and thread. She spun herself from sheep wool. She's currently working on a tear in Gaius's cloak, probably caught on a thorn bush during patrol. Later, she'll need to reinforce the hem on Julia's dress where it's starting to fray. After that, Marcus's leggings need a patch where he wore through the knee. The pile of mending never shrinks. She finishes one item and two more appear. For those who remember the Depression, when make do and mend wasn't a clever slogan but simple economic reality, this will be familiar territory. Nothing gets thrown away if it can possibly be repaired. Waste is incomprehensible when every item represents significant investment of time and money. Mid-morning means thinking about the midday meal. What's available? Barley, always barley, the staple grain of northern Britain. Some root vegetables from the winter storage pit behind the house, though they're starting to wrinkle and sprout. A bit of cheese if she can justify using it now rather than saving it for later. Maybe some eggs if she can get to the market before the other women buy them all. The mental calculation never stops. What do we have? What do we need? What can we afford to trade for? What must we save for later? Every decision ripples forward. Use the cheese now and there's no cheese later. Save it too long and it spoils. The math of scarcity is complex and constant. She settles on a plan. Barley soup with root vegetables, seasoned with herbs from her small garden, and perhaps one egg stirred in to make it more substantial. This will feed 4 people, assuming Gaius makes it home for the midday meal, which he probably won't because the Legion doesn't arrange its schedule around domestic convenience. After settling the children with a task, Marcus is supposed to be practicing his letters, which he's supposed to be learning from the schoolmaster down the street, though whether that's actually happening is questionable. Marcia steps outside to check the garden. Calling it a garden is generous. It's a small plot of earth behind the house, fenced against animals and children with woven wattle, where she's managed to coax some vegetables to grow, despite Britain's complete lack of cooperation with Mediterranean farming expectations. The leeks are looking acceptable. The kale survives through sheer stubbornness. The onions are small but present. Everything else has either died, been eaten by animals, or never sprouted in the first place. Still, even this pathetic harvest represents precious food security. Every leek she pulls is one less item she needs to trade for at the market. She pulls 2 leeks, brushes most of the mud off them, and heads back inside. The soup won't make itself, and the children have almost certainly stopped doing whatever task she left them with and are now doing something that will require intervention. Correct on both counts. Marcus is nowhere near his wax tablet and stylus. Julia is trying to climb the storage chest to reach something she shouldn't have. Standard operating procedure for a mid-morning in a Roman household with small children. Julia, down. Marcus, where are you supposed to be? But I was just... Both children start simultaneously. No. The answer is no to whatever you were about to say. Marcus, letters, Julia, sit here and don't move. The soup comes together slowly. Barley soaked overnight goes into the pot. The leeks, chopped. Water from the precious supply. A bit of salt expensive, so not too much. Herbs from the rafters, where they've been drying since autumn. Let it simmer for an hour and you have food. It won't be delicious by any stretch. It will be filling and nutritious enough to keep a family functioning. That's the bar. Not enjoyment, not culinary excellence. Just adequate nutrition to prevent disease and maintain strength for the next day's labor. Those who remember the wartime rationing, making meals from ration books, stretching ingredients to feed a family when nothing was abundant, you'll recognize this calculus. The difference is that Marcia's rationing never ends. There's no post-war period where things get easier. This is just life, every day, forever. While the soup cooks, there's a brief moment, rare and precious, where nothing immediately demands Marcia's attention. The children are occupied, the fire is stable, the soup is cooking itself for the moment. She could sit down. She doesn't, of course. Sitting means admitting she's tired, and admitting she's tired might mean actually feeling it, which would be counterproductive when there's still most of a day ahead. Instead, she uses the moment to organize the storage chest, consolidating half-empty sacks of grain, checking for signs of mice or mold, making mental notes of what's running low. Barley, enough for 2 weeks. Dried beans, maybe a week. Salt, desperately low. Olive oil, laughable. They ran out of that months ago and now use animal fat for everything. Honey, less than there should be thanks to Julia. Wine, enough for another month if she continues watering it heavily. Firewood, adequate for now, but someone, probably her, needs to make another trip to collect fallen branches soon. This endless inventory, this constant awareness of what's running low, what needs replacing, what can be stretched further. It's exhausting in a way that physical labor isn't. Physical labor at least ends when the task is done. This mental labor never ends. There's always something running low, something needing attention, something requiring a decision. Modern logistics software could learn things from the mental accounting systems of women managing frontier households in the 2nd century. From outside comes a familiar sound, Claudia's voice, calling something Marcia can't quite make out. She goes to the door, and there's her neighbor, looking tired. "I brought eggs," Claudia says, holding up a small basket, "for the soup you sent last week when I couldn't get out of bed." Marcia hadn't expected repayment. You help your neighbors because someday you'll need help, and because not helping feels wrong. But eggs are welcome, always welcome. "You're looking better," Marcia observes. Feeling better, still tired but better. Whatever that sickness was, it hit hard. This is another reality of vicus life, disease. With hundreds of people living in close quarters, sharing water sources, sharing limited sanitation, sickness spreads fast. Last month it was Claudia's household. Next month it might be Marcia's. The month after, someone else's. The cycle continues, broken only occasionally by the more permanent solution of death. They talk for a few minutes. The small talk of neighboring women who know each other's lives in detail because privacy is almost impossible in this setting. Claudia's husband is on patrol beyond the wall. Marcia's is training new recruits. Claudia's daughter is learning to spin wool. Marcia's son is supposed to be learning letters, but probably isn't. The usual. Then Claudia heads back to her own household, and Marcia returns to hers, adding the eggs to her mental inventory with satisfaction. 3 eggs. That's tomorrow's breakfast sorted, or possibly a treat for tonight if Gaius makes it home and she feels generous. The soup is ready. She tastes it. Adequate. Not wonderful, not terrible, just adequate. She serves some to the children, who eat it without complaint because they're genuinely hungry. She sets aside a portion for Gaius, though whether he'll be home to eat it is anyone's guess. She eats a bowl herself, standing up, because sitting down for meals feels like wasted time when there's so much to do. And then, because life continues regardless of whether you've eaten, it's time for the next task, which is, inevitably, more water. After the midday meal comes the necessity of the market. Not the leisure of shopping, the grinding requirement of obtaining what the household needs to continue functioning. Marcia needs salt desperately. She needs firewood or the money to buy it. She needs to see what's available, what prices are running, what opportunities might exist for trade. The Vicus market isn't a formal structure with set hours and regulated prices. It's an informal gathering in the open space near the fort's southern gate where merchants set up temporary stalls and anyone with something to sell or trade can join in. The noise level is substantial. Merchants calling out their wares, customers haggling, children playing, animals making their various complaints known. Marcia stops at the pottery merchant's stall. Her large cooking pot has developed a crack. It's still functional if she's careful, but eventually it will fail completely, probably at the worst possible moment. She examines the replacement options, checking for cracks, weighing them in her hands, mentally calculating whether this is the week to make that purchase or whether the current pot has another month in it. Good quality, the merchant assures her. Fired properly won't crack in the heat. She's heard this before. Every merchant claims good quality. Some are even telling the truth. But pottery is like anything else. You get what you pay for, and what she can afford isn't the best quality available. How much? He names a price. She counters with something lower. He looks offended. She starts to walk away. He calls her back, proposes a middle price. She considers, calculates, decides the current pot has at least another month before catastrophic failure, and moves on without buying. The fabric merchant has wool. Marcus needs a new cloak. He's growing fast, and his current one barely reaches his knees anymore. The merchant shows her options: rough wool that will keep out rain but be scratchy and uncomfortable, or finer wool that feels better but costs significantly more and won't be as weather resistant. For those who remember shopping for children's clothes during the Depression or the war years, when you had to balance durability against cost, comfort against longevity, you'll recognize this calculation. Children grow. Children are hard on clothing. Buying the finest quality is wasteful when they'll outgrow it in months. But buying the cheapest quality means replacing it even faster when it falls apart. She settles on the medium quality wool after extensive negotiation, trades 2 of the eggs Claudia gave her and a small bronze fibula pin she's been saving, and walks away with enough fabric to make a cloak if she spends the next week sewing it by firelight after the children sleep. There's a traveling merchant with exotic goods from the south. Glass bottles that catch the light beautifully. Bronze mirrors polished to near perfect reflection. Dried figs and dates from the Mediterranean, spices whose names Marcia doesn't even know, all breathtakingly expensive. All utterly impractical for a legionary's family living on soldiers' pay. Still, she stops to look. Just looking costs nothing, and sometimes it's valuable to remember that the empire is larger than this gray, cold frontier. Somewhere south of here, there's sunshine. There are cities with marble buildings and public fountains. There are places where people eat figs for breakfast instead of barley porridge. She won't see those places again, probably. She made her choice when she followed Gaius to Britain. But knowing they exist matters somehow. What Marcia has for trading is limited. Some bronze coins Gaius gave her from his last pay. A few items she can spare from their household. Her own labor, if anyone needs sewing or mending done. That's the currency here: small amounts of money, barter goods, and services traded among neighbors. The salt merchant wants real coins. Salt comes from a long way away, either mined or produced by boiling seawater, and it's valuable enough that merchants won't accept trade goods for it. She hands over precious bronze and receives a cloth bag of coarse sea salt in return. This will last perhaps 2 months if she's careful, less if she's not. With the salt secured and the wool purchased, her market business is essentially complete. She could browse longer, but the children are home alone, and the longer she stays, the greater the chance they've gotten into some disaster requiring intervention. The walk back home takes her past the bathhouse. a smaller version of Rome's famous baths, built for the soldiers but accessible to vicus residents for a fee. She can hear voices inside, smell the distinctive scent of hot water and bodies and the olive oil used for cleaning. A bath would be wonderful. A chance to actually get clean, to soak in hot water, to feel warm for an extended period. But baths cost money, and today's purchases have depleted her small store of coins. Maybe next week, maybe the week after, maybe never if other necessities keep arising. It's been 3 months since her last bath. She can manage longer. Those who grew up in rural areas before indoor plumbing, when Saturday night baths in a tin tub were the norm, and you bathed weekly if you were fortunate, monthly if you were typical, will understand this particular compromise with cleanliness. You do what you can with limited resources and try not to think too hard about it. She arrives home to find Marcus practicing sword fighting with a stick, because of course he is. All legionary sons practice sword fighting with sticks. It's practically genetic at this point. Julia has somehow gotten into the yarn basket and has created a cat's cradle situation that will take an hour to untangle, if it can be untangled at all, which is questionable. Marcus, put the stick down before you break something. But father says I need to practice. Your father can buy new pottery when you break it then. Until then, outside with the stick. Marcus trudges outside, muttering something about unfairness. 8-year-olds and fairness have an interesting relationship. Everything that prevents them from doing what they want is unfair, while everything that works in their favor is simply justice. The yarn situation is worse than it initially appeared. Julia has managed to create knots that seem to defy physics. Marcia sits down. Actually sits down, a rarity, and begins the painstaking process of unknotting. Each loop must be carefully traced back to its source. Rush it, and the yarn breaks. Break it too many times, and the yarn becomes useless. This is meditative work in its way. It requires attention but not complex thought. Her hands move automatically, finding the pattern in the chaos, slowly restoring order. Julia watches, fascinated by what her mother can do with patience and skill. "Are you angry?" Julia asks quietly. "Yes," Marcia says honestly, "but I'm fixing it so it's manageable angry, not catastrophic angry." Julia seems to process this distinction, filing it away in whatever mental category 5-year-olds use for understanding adult emotions. By the time the yarn is mostly salvaged, some will need to be cut and spliced, but most is recoverable. The afternoon has progressed significantly. The angle of light through the window tells her it's perhaps 3 hours before sunset. In winter at this latitude, that means darkness is coming soon. She needs to think about the evening meal. She needs to bring in more firewood. She needs to check whether Gaius sent any message about when he'll be home. She needs to finish the mending she started this morning. She needs to begin work on Marcus's new cloak before the fabric sits untouched for weeks. The list never ends. Task completion just reveals the next task waiting beneath. Those who've managed households will recognize this particular treadmill. No matter how much you accomplish, there's always more demanding attention. The firewood situation requires attention. The pile behind the house is running low. Tomorrow, or the next day, she'll need to take Marcus and head to the wooded area half a mile from the settlement to gather fallen branches. This means hours of walking, picking up wood, bundling it, and hauling it back. It means exposure to weather and the small but real risk of encountering something dangerous. But the alternative is no fire, and no fire means no cooking, no warmth, and eventually no survival. So the wood gathering will happen, like it happens every week, because the need for fuel is as constant as the need for water or food. She brings in enough wood for tonight and tomorrow, stacking it near the hearth where it will dry. Wet wood smokes terribly and provides minimal heat, so the indoor storage isn't luxury, it's practical necessity. Evening meal preparation begins. Bread dough comes together from barley flour, water, and salt. No yeast? That's a complexity they skip. Just unleavened flatbread that cooks quickly on a hot stone at the fire's edge. She'll make enough for tonight and tomorrow morning, assuming mice don't get into it overnight, which they might, despite her best efforts. The leftover soup from midday will be tonight's main dish, supplemented by the flatbread and perhaps some cheese if she decides to be generous. This is the evening meal for most of the year, some variation of grain, perhaps some vegetable, occasionally some meat or fish if available and affordable. Variety isn't a priority. Nutrition and fullness are the priorities. You eat what's available, and you're grateful it's available because the alternative is not eating. Outside, the settlement transitions toward evening. The market has closed. Soldiers off-duty head to taverns or to their families. Children are called inside. The temperature drops noticeably as the sun, such as it is in Britain, disappears behind the western hills. This daily rhythm has existed since the vicus was established. It will continue long after Marcia and her family are gone. The eternal cycle of frontier military life: wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat. The individual changes, but the pattern persists. From the direction of the fort comes the sound of the evening cornu call. Fourth watch is ending. Night watch is beginning. Gaius still isn't home, which means he's on duty through the night or assigned to some task that will keep him at the fort. Marcia sets his portion of soup aside, covers it, and accepts that tonight it's just her and the children. They eat together in companionable quiet. Marcus is tired from the day's activities. Julia is simply tired in the way 5-year-olds become tired when the sun sets, suddenly and completely. Marcia is tired in the way that mothers of young children are always tired, which is to say, functionally tired, but unable to stop because stopping means things don't get done. After the meal comes cleanup. Bowls are wiped with bread to get every bit of soup. Nothing is wasted and then stacked for washing tomorrow. The cooking pot is scraped clean and set aside. The flatbread is wrapped in cloth and stored where mice are less likely to find it, though they're clever creatures and have surprised her before. The children are put to bed without much resistance. They're genuinely tired. Julia needs her blankets arranged just so, a request Marcia honors because it takes less time than arguing. Marcus wants to know when father will be home, a question Marcia can't answer because she doesn't know. Tomorrow, probably, she says, which might be true. But will he? Marcus starts. Sleep now, questions tomorrow. And because he's tired enough, he actually complies, which is a small mercy at the end of a long day. With the children asleep, Marcia finally has time for the work that requires concentration. She spreads the wool fabric near the fire where the light is best, measures it against Marcus's current cloak to estimate sizing, and begins cutting. This is irreversible. Once cut, the fabric can't be uncut. So she measures twice, 3 times, checks and rechecks before making each cut. Those who've done their own sewing, their own garment construction, will appreciate the care required here. Modern clothing is cheap enough that mistakes are annoying but not catastrophic. Here, mistakes mean wasted resources that can't be replaced. So you take your time, you check your work, and you accept that this single cloak will take multiple evenings to complete. The sewing is meditative. Needle in, pull through, needle in, pull through. The rhythm is soothing after the chaos of the day. Her hands work almost automatically, following patterns learned in childhood, refined through years of necessity. This is the women's work that enabled empire. While historians wrote about battles and emperors, women sat by fires across the provinces, sewing clothes, preparing food, raising children, maintaining the domestic infrastructure that allowed soldiers to fight and administrators to administrate. Invisible labor, essential labor. Outside, the night continues. She can hear occasional sounds from the settlement, a baby crying, a dog barking, someone's drunken singing from a tavern, the distant tread of sentries on the wall. The familiar soundscape of a military community at night. Time passes in the slow way it does when you're focused on handwork. Stitch after stitch, the seams come together. She completes one side of the cloak before her eyes start to blur from the close work and insufficient light. That's enough for tonight. Tomorrow evening she'll continue, and the evening after that. Perhaps 4 or 5 nights of work, and Marcus will have a new cloak that should last him through the next year if he doesn't grow too fast. Finally, when the cloak work is put aside for the night, Marcia banks the fire one more time, extinguishes the oil lamp. Oil is expensive, and burning it when you're not using the light is wasteful, and prepares for bed. The sleeping platform feels cold without Gaius, empty. She's used to it. Military wives get used to sleeping alone more nights than not, but that doesn't mean she likes it. Still, there's something to be said for having the blankets to herself, for not having to share warmth with someone who generates less heat than he takes. Tomorrow will be another day much like today. Water to fetch, meals to prepare, children to supervise, endless maintenance tasks to complete. The day after will be the same, and the day after that. This is life at Hadrian's Wall. Not dramatic, not particularly noteworthy, just the grinding daily reality of survival and family maintenance on the edge of empire. She pulls the blankets up, arranges herself on the hard sleeping platform, and closes her eyes. Sleep comes quickly when you've worked hard all day. And tomorrow, the cycle begins again. Life beyond the barracks, community, fear, and connection. Life in the Vicus isn't entirely composed of drudgery and labor. There are moments, precious and rare, but genuine, when the community comes together for something resembling normalcy. Festivals marking Roman religious holidays, market days with traveling entertainers, the occasional celebration when a unit returns from extended patrol, military ceremonies where civilians are invited to witness. These events serve a crucial function. They remind everyone that they're part of something larger than their individual struggle for survival. They create social bonds, provide entertainment, offer breaks from routine. They're as essential to frontier life as food and shelter, though less obviously so. Marcia stands with Claudia and several other women, watching a traveling entertainer juggle colored balls. The children are mesmerized. Even the adults smile, briefly forgetting the weight of daily concerns. The bathhouse represents another aspect of life beyond pure survival, the attempt to maintain Roman civilization in decidedly un-Roman circumstances. The baths here aren't the grand affairs of Rome or even of southern provincial cities. They're modest, a changing room, a cold plunge, a warm room, and a hot room. No elaborate mosaics, no marble columns, no armies of slaves attending to every need. But they're still baths. They still provide hot water, cleaning, and social space. Women gather to gossip and trade information. Men discuss business and politics. Children learn to swim in the cold plunge pool. It's a piece of Mediterranean culture transplanted to the British frontier, stubborn and improbable, but functioning. Marcia manages a bath perhaps once a month when she can spare the fee. It's as much for the social connection as for the cleaning. In the warm room, where women sit and talk while sweating out the accumulated dirt and cold of frontier life, information flows freely. "Did you hear about the patrol last week?" one woman asks, not naming names because everyone knows which patrol. 3 men wounded, 1 dead, another confirms. They encountered a raiding party north of the wall. This is how news travels in the Vicus, through the women's network at the baths, at the market, at the well. Official announcements come from the fort, but real information, the details that matter to families, circulates through informal channels. "My Marcus is asking to join the youth auxiliary," Marcia mentions, half seeking advice, half simply voicing her worry. "They all want to," an older woman says. She's been at the wall for 20 years, seen 2 husbands through to discharge. Sons of legionaries always want to follow. Sometimes they survive it. The casual brutality of that statement, "sometimes they survive," would shock civilians from safe provinces. Here, it's simply acknowledged reality. Death is always close on the frontier. You don't pretend otherwise. Back in the settlement, Marcus and other boys his age play at war. They've formed themselves into centuries, elected centurions from among their number, and are conducting mock drills with wooden swords. The play is serious, competitive, and surprisingly accurate in its reflection of actual military practice. This is how empire perpetuates itself. Boys watching their fathers, imitating what they see, absorbing military culture through their pores. By the time Marcus is old enough to enlist, if he chooses to, though the choice is more theoretical than real for a legionary's son, he'll already know the basic formations, the commands, the expectations. The army will be less a foreign institution than a familiar home. Marcia watches him from the doorway, feeling the complex mix of pride and dread that mothers of soldiers to be have felt since warfare was invented. He's good at this. He's natural at leadership, at tactics, at the physical demands, which means he'll probably survive if he enlists. Or it means he'll be confident enough to take risks that get him killed. The calculus is impossible. Not all social interaction is formal or structured. Much of it happens organically as women work. Several times a week, weather permitting, a group gathers in the space between houses to work on textile production together. Spinning, weaving, carding wool, sewing, mending. All tasks that can be done while talking, sharing information, supporting each other. This isn't organized by anyone. It just happens. One woman starts working outside, another joins her, then another, and soon you have an informal work group that serves as both productivity boost and social support network. "How's Gaius?" Claudia asks while working her drop spindle, creating thread from loose wool. "The usual. Gone more than home, but safe so far." "Thank the gods for that," another woman murmurs, touching the protective amulet she wears around her neck. These conversations are important. They maintain sanity. They create bonds. When Claudia was sick last month, Marcia brought soup. When Marcia needs to collect firewood and can't leave the children alone, Claudia watches them. This reciprocal support network is as essential to survival as food or shelter. The work rhythms are ancient, predating Rome, predating written history. Women have been spinning thread like this for millennia. The technology hasn't changed because it doesn't need to. A drop spindle works perfectly well for converting raw wool into usable thread. That it's slow and labor-intensive is irrelevant when labor is essentially free and time is abundant. For those who remember grandmothers or great-grandmothers who still spun their own yarn, who still wove their own fabric, this scene would be recognizable across the centuries. The specific tools might be slightly different, but the fundamental technique remains constant. "I need to teach Julia to spin soon," Marcia mentions. "She's old enough." "Good luck," one of the other women laughs. "Mine wouldn't sit still long enough to learn until she was 7. Mine learned at 5 but produced thread so uneven it was useless for anything but rag stuffing," another adds. The shared experiences of motherhood transcend time and place. Children resist learning practical skills. They learn at their own pace despite parental wishes. They make mistakes that waste materials. And eventually, if you're patient and persistent, they learn. And then they teach their own daughters, continuing the cycle. The peace of the afternoon work gathering is shattered by the cornu blast from the fort. Not the regular time-marking signals everyone knows by heart. This is different, urgent, the call to arms. Every head snaps up. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Women look at each other with the particular dread of those who've heard this signal before and know what it means. Raiding party spotted, or a patrol in trouble, or something breaching the wall defenses. The specifics vary, but the core reality doesn't. Somewhere close by, violence is happening or about to happen. The market empties rapidly as civilians retreat to homes and soldiers rush to the fort. Within minutes, the streets that were bustling with life are nearly deserted. Doors close, shutters lock. The vicus transforms from civilian settlement to potential battlefield. Marcia's response is automatic, drilled by experience. Get the children inside, bar the door, close the shutters, gather weapons such as they are. A kitchen knife isn't much, but it's something. Then wait. This is the terror of frontier life distilled to its essence, helplessness in the face of potential violence. The soldiers will handle whatever the threat is. Civilians can only shelter in place and hope the walls hold, hope the Legion responds quickly enough, hope the raiders don't make it this far south. Marcus wants to know what's happening. Julia is crying. Marcia holds them both, makes soothing noises, and lies with practiced ease. It's just a drill. The soldiers are practicing. We're safe. She doesn't know if they're safe. No one knows yet. But frightening children serves no purpose, so you lie and hope the lie becomes truth. From inside the house, Marcia can hear the organized chaos of military deployment. The rhythmic tread of hundreds of boots, centurions shouting commands, the jingle and clank of armor and weapons, the thunder of cavalry hooves. This is the Roman war machine activating, and despite the danger, there's something reassuring about its efficiency. These are trained professionals. They've done this countless times. They know their roles, their formations, their responses to different threats. If anyone can protect the settlement, it's them. Time passes with agonizing slowness. Minutes feel like hours when you're waiting to learn whether violence is coming your direction. Marcia keeps the children quiet, listens for sounds that might indicate the situation's progression, and waits. Those who remember air raid drills during the war, or the terrifying uncertainty of Cold War nuclear scares, might recognize this particular flavor of helpless waiting. You've done all you can do. Now you wait for others to determine your fate. It's a powerless position, and powerlessness breeds fear, regardless of how many times you've experienced it. Eventually, 20 minutes, an hour, time distorts during crises. The sounds from outside change. The urgent military activity shifts to something more routine. She hears voices returning to normal volume. The tension in the air seems to ease, though that might be wishful thinking. Finally, a knock at the door. She doesn't open immediately. Who is it? Gaius. She bars the door, and there he is, still in full armor, streaked with mud, but apparently unharmed. Raiders, he says simply. Small party, spotted before they reached the wall, turn them back. It's done. The relief is physical. A loosening in her chest she didn't realize was tight. She pulls him inside, ignoring the mud and weapons, just needing confirmation that he's actually whole and safe. Marcus has questions. Were there battles? Did father fight? How many raiders were there? The questions of a boy for whom this is exciting rather than terrifying. Gaius answers patiently while removing his armor, piece by piece, each section heavy and awkward to manage alone. Marcia helps with the straps, a routine they've performed countless times. The armor comes off, revealing the sweat-soaked tunic beneath. He's unharmed this time. Other times there have been cuts, bruises, once a minor sword wound. This time, just mud and exhaustion. How close? Marcia asks quietly, meaning, how close did they get to the settlement? Never crossed the wall. Cavalry intercepted them 3 miles out, probably just probing our defenses, not a serious attack. Not serious by military standards, still terrifying by civilian standards. But this is the difference in perspective that defines frontier military life. What's routine to soldiers is nightmare, fuel to families. Life resumes. Gaius eats his delayed meal. Marcia continues the evening tasks she'd interrupted. The children settle, the excitement fading into ordinary evening energy. Within an hour, it's as though the alarm never happened, except for the lingering adrenaline that will take hours to fully dissipate. This is frontier resilience, the ability to shift instantly from terror to normalcy, because constant fear is unsustainable. You respond to crises when they occur. When they pass, you return to routine. The alternative, maintaining constant vigilance and fear, would break you mentally within weeks. For those who served in combat zones, who experienced the strange normality that develops even in dangerous situations, this pattern will be familiar. Humans are remarkably adaptable. We can normalize almost anything if we must. And on the frontier, you must. Before settling fully into evening routine, Marcia makes offerings at the household shrine. The Lairs protected them today. Gratitude must be expressed. Whether the gods actually intervened or whether it was simply military competence and luck doesn't matter. The appropriate response is thanks. This is religion as lived by common people, practical, transactional, deeply sincere. Not the abstract philosophy debated by intellectuals, but the daily practice of those who need divine favor, because human efforts alone seem insufficient to ensure survival. She murmurs brief prayers. Keep my family safe. Keep this house standing. Keep the raiders beyond the wall. Simple requests, universal requests. The eternal prayers of people living in dangerous times. Gaius watches this with the quiet acceptance of a man who's seen too much combat to dismiss any possible source of protection. He's not particularly devout, but he's also not willing to offend potential divine protectors through neglect. Soldiers on the frontier tend toward practical superstition, better safe than sorry. The family's role in the legion's life. The relationship between the legion and the families of the Vicus isn't simply one of dependence, it's deeply symbiotic. The legion provides security, employment, and economic stimulus. The families provide services, support, and the domestic infrastructure that makes military service sustainable over years and decades. Neither can function properly without the other. Marcia's household, like every household in the Vicus, contributes to this ecosystem in ways both obvious and subtle. The most obvious contribution is economic. Every denarius Gaius earns eventually flows through Marcia's hands into the local economy. She buys food from local farmers and merchants. She pays for services, the fuller who cleans Gaius's cloak, the cobbler who repairs his boots, the barber who cuts his hair. She trades for goods produced by other Vicus residents. This circulation of money and goods creates employment for people who aren't soldiers, but whose livelihoods depend entirely on the military presence. The blacksmith who repairs armor, the tavern keeper who sells wine to off-duty soldiers, the prostitutes who provide services the army officially disapproves of, but tacitly accepts, the merchants who import luxury goods soldiers buy with their pay. All of these people exist because the Legion is here. This morning, Marcia has brought one of Gaius's armor sections to the metalworker for repair. A strap has broken, and while she could attempt to fix it herself, military equipment needs to meet military standards. A poorly repaired piece of armor can get a man killed, so specialists handle this work. The metalworker is a Briton named Bran, who learned his trade from his father and has been working with Roman military equipment for 2 decades. He examines the broken strap, quotes a price, and promises completion by tomorrow. Marcia negotiates, not aggressively, but firmly, and they settle on a price slightly lower than his initial offer. He knows she'll be back. She knows he does good work. The relationship is ongoing, built on mutual need and grudging respect. This transaction, repeated thousands of times daily across the Vicus, represents the unofficial but absolutely essential support network that keeps the Legion functional. The army provides basic equipment and maintenance, but soldiers often need private repairs, replacements, or upgrades. Families facilitate this, managing the transactions, maintaining the relationships, ensuring their soldiers have what they need when they need it. Those who remember company towns in the early 20th century, where the entire local economy depended on a single employer, the coal mine, the textile mill, the railroad, will recognize this dynamic. The legion is that employer, magnified. If the legion leaves, the vicus collapses. Every civilian resident knows this. It creates a strange combination of security and vulnerability. Security, because the legion isn't going anywhere soon. Hadrian's Wall is a permanent installation, expected to last generations. Vulnerability, because if imperial policy changes, if the legion gets transferred, if Rome decides to withdraw from Britain, thousands of civilian lives are upended instantly. But worrying about that is like worrying about the sun not rising tomorrow. Possible in theory, unlikely in practice. So people don't think about it much. They focus on immediate concerns, like getting armor repaired and children fed. The taverns serve another crucial function beyond simply selling alcohol. They're information exchanges, social centers, neutral ground where soldiers and civilians mix. Marcia rarely enters them. They're predominantly male spaces, and women who frequent taverns too often acquire unfortunate reputations, but she's not completely excluded either. Sometimes Gaius sends word through a tavern keeper. Sometimes she needs to deliver a message to him when he's off duty. Sometimes she simply needs to find him, and the tavern is the first place to check. The tavern keepers know everyone, know everything, and for small considerations will pass along information, hold messages, or facilitate connections. This informal communication network is vital in a community where official channels are limited and literacy isn't universal. The tavern keeper becomes something between a postmaster and a gossip columnist, facilitating the social connections that keep the community functioning. Looking for Gaius? The tavern keeper asks before Marcia even speaks. She knows. She always knows. Is he here? Was. Left for the fort an hour ago. Called back for something? Didn't say what. Marcia thanks her, slips a small coin across the counter, and leaves. The coin isn't payment for the information that flows freely in both directions. It's appreciation, a contribution to maintaining the relationship. Next time the tavern keeper needs something, maybe Marcia can help. That's how these networks function. Reciprocal favors, accumulated goodwill, the informal economy of mutual obligation. This web of relationships, maintained primarily by women, is as essential to military effectiveness as weapons and armor. It ensures soldiers can focus on their military duties, while domestic and logistical concerns are handled competently. It provides moral support, practical assistance, and social stability. The Legion's command knows this, even if they don't formally acknowledge it. The economic reality of military life is complex and carefully regulated. Gaius earns approximately 900 sesterces per year as a basic legionary decent money by provincial standards, though far from wealthy. From this, the Legion automatically deducts amounts for food, equipment replacement, burial club membership, and various other official expenses. What actually reaches his hands is perhaps 2/3 of the nominal pay. Of that amount, a portion must be saved. Roman military regulations require soldiers to maintain savings accounts, ostensibly for their retirement, but also as a mechanism for preventing desertion and ensuring financial stability. What remains after required savings is what Gaius gives to Marcia for household management. This is perhaps 300 to 400 sesterces per year, distributed monthly. Marcia must make this stretch to cover food the army doesn't provide, clothing for the family, household goods, medical expenses when needed, and all the countless small costs of daily life. It's tight. It requires constant, careful management. But it's predictable, which matters more than abundance. For those who remember military pay systems in the mid-20th century, the regular, if modest, paychecks, the automatic deductions, the emphasis on saving for the future. There are striking parallels. The Roman military understood that financial stability contributed to unit cohesion and soldier reliability. Desperate men make poor soldiers. Men with families to feed and savings accounts to protect make reliable, motivated soldiers who won't risk desertion or insubordination. The families benefit from this system's predictability even as they struggle with its limitations. Marcia knows exactly how much money she'll have each month. She can plan accordingly, make decisions about what's affordable and what must wait. The certainty is worth more than a larger but irregular income would be. But it also means she has very limited room for unexpected expenses. When Marcus needed medicine last winter, it consumed 2 months of discretionary funds. When Julia outgrew her shoes, something else had to be delayed. The budget is efficient but unforgiving. Every week, Marcia performs her household accounting. Not with formal ledgers. She's not educated in that way, but with her own system of marks and mental calculation. She knows to the sesterce how much she has, how much she's committed to spending, how much remains for flexibility. She tracks prices at the market, notices trends, plans purchases around seasonal availability and price fluctuations. This mental labor is sophisticated and constant. Modern budgeting apps would struggle to match the complexity of calculations she performs automatically, keeping multiple variables in mind simultaneously while making trade-offs and priority decisions. The children benefit from this management without understanding it. They eat regularly. They have clothes. The house stays warm. To them, these things simply happen, the way children throughout history have assumed their material needs will be met by mysterious parental competence. They don't see the calculations, the trade-offs, the careful prioritization that makes their comfortable ignorance possible. The family's contribution to the Legion extends beyond economics into cultural reproduction. Marcus is being raised to be a soldier. Not through formal decision, though. Gaius certainly hopes his son will follow him into the legions, but through daily immersion in military culture. Marcus knows the legion's structure. He can identify ranks by equipment and insignia. He understands formations and basic tactics from watching drills and listening to his father's explanations. He's absorbed military values, discipline, hierarchy, endurance, loyalty to comrades. By the time he's old enough to enlist, he'll already be half-trained. This isn't unique to Marcus. Every boy in the Vicus undergoes similar informal military education. The Legion doesn't need to recruit strangers and train them for nothing. Instead, it draws from a population already acculturated to military life, already familiar with expectations and standards, already committed to the institution through family connections. The girls receive different but equally important education. Julia is learning household management by watching her mother. She helps with age, appropriate tasks, fetching small items, watching the fire, attempting to spin thread with childish incompetence that will eventually develop into skill. By the time she's old enough to marry, probably to a legionary, because who else would she meet? She'll know how to manage a military household on the frontier. Several times a year, the Legion conducts formal parades and ceremonies that the civilian population is invited to witness. These serve multiple purposes. They're demonstrations of military power. Look at the might of Rome, organized and disciplined. They're morale boosters for the soldiers, reminding them they're part of something larger than themselves. And they're community events, binding civilian and military populations together through shared spectacle. Marcia brings the children to watch. Marcus is transfixed by the formations, the standards, the discipline. He wants to be part of that. The army knows this. That's partly why they do it. Every boy who watches a Legion parade becomes a potential future recruit, already half convinced that military service represents the pinnacle of male achievement. Julia is less interested in the formations than in the spectacle. The colorful standards, the gleaming armor, the music of military drums and horns. For her, it's entertainment. But she's also absorbing lessons about her place in this world, watching from the sidelines, supporting from home, being the person waiting for the soldier to return. For those who remember military parades in the 1940s and 50s, the post-war celebrations, the 4th of July displays of American military might, there's something familiar here. The same mixture of pride, propaganda, and community bonding. The same sense that military service represents something noble and worthy of honor. The family's most direct contribution to military effectiveness comes through moral support. When Gaius leaves for patrol, which he does regularly, disappearing beyond the wall for days at a time into potentially hostile territory, he leaves knowing his family is cared for. The settlement provides security. The community provides support if Marcia needs help. His savings are managed competently. His children are being raised properly. This matters more than civilian populations often understand. A soldier worried about his family's welfare is distracted, less effective, potentially dangerous to himself and his comrades. A soldier, confident his domestic affairs are handled, can focus entirely on his military duties. Marcia's competent household management directly contributes to Gaius's combat effectiveness. By ensuring he has nothing to worry about at home, she enables him to focus on the dangerous work of frontier patrol. This isn't abstract support, it's concrete and essential. 3 days, Gaius says, the statement both information and promise. 3 days, Marcia confirms. We'll be fine. They don't embrace dramatically. This isn't their first patrol separation and won't be their last. The goodbye is matter-of-fact, almost casual. Only the tightness in Marcia's chest betrays her underlying fear that this time might be different, that this might be the patrol from which he doesn't return. She watches until she can't see him anymore, then closes the door and returns to the warmth. The day's work will begin soon. The children will wake demanding breakfast. The fire will need building up. Water will need fetching. Life continues regardless of who's present or absent. This is perhaps the most profound way military families support the Legion, by continuing, by maintaining normalcy despite uncertainty, by ensuring that when soldiers return from patrol or deployment or battle, they return to something worth fighting for. Home, family, the simple domestic rhythms that make life meaningful. The Legion depends on this as much as it depends on weapons and armor and tactical training. Without the families, without the vicus communities, without the domestic infrastructure that makes long-term service sustainable, the frontier cannot hold. The military leadership knows this, even if they don't always acknowledge it publicly. The long goodbye, hope and uncertainty. Winter at Hadrian's Wall is when the reality of frontier life reveals itself most starkly. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. The wind that blows constantly across the northern hills cuts through any clothing, finds every gap in walls, makes simple tasks like fetching water genuinely hazardous. Food becomes scarcer. The prices rise for everything. Fresh vegetables disappear entirely, leaving only stored grains and preserved foods. Animals suffer, which means less milk, fewer eggs, reduced meat availability. The Legion's supply chains continue functioning, but civilian populations face genuine hardship. Disease spreads more easily. Close quarters and limited ventilation mean that when someone in the vicus gets sick, illness ripples through the community rapidly. This winter, there's been a coughing sickness that's killed 3 children and an elderly woman. The fort's medicus can do little beyond recommending rest and isolation, neither of which is particularly practical in one-room dwellings where entire families share sleeping spaces. When Julia falls ill, fever, racking cough, listlessness that terrifies Marcia more than the fever does, there are limited options. The fort's medicus will see civilian families, but his knowledge is limited and his treatments more hopeful than proven. Marcia tries everything she knows, herbal teas from the market woman who claims British healing knowledge, keeping Julia warm, forcing fluids, prayers to every god who might listen. For 3 days, Julia burns with fever. Marcia doesn't sleep, maintaining constant vigil. Marcus watches from across the room, old enough to understand his sister might die, young enough to not really comprehend what that means. Gaius gets word but can't leave his duties. The Legion doesn't grant leave for sick children, not even potentially dying sick children. This is the brutal calculation of military life. Duty supersedes family. The mission takes precedence over personal crisis. Gaius knows his daughter might be dying. He stays at his post because that's what soldiers do. Marcia knows he's not coming home. She manages the crisis alone because that's what military wives do. Those who remember the pre-antibiotic era, when children routinely died from infections we now treat with a pill, will understand Marcia's helplessness. You do what you can with what you have, and you pray it's enough, knowing it often isn't. On the 4th day, Julia's fever breaks. The crisis passes. She's weak, frighteningly thin, and the cough lingers for weeks, but she's alive. Marcia collapses into exhausted relief, having held herself together through pure willpower for days. The community rallies with small kindnesses. Claudia brings soup. Another neighbor watches Marcus for a few hours, so Marcia can sleep. Someone leaves eggs anonymously at the door. When Gaius finally comes home 2 days later, Julia is sitting up and eating thin porridge. He holds her carefully, this daughter who nearly died while he stood watch on the wall. There's no anger at his absence. Marcia understands military requirements, but there's a bone-deep weariness in both of them, the emotional exhaustion of a crisis survived but not forgotten. These crises, illness, injury, the constant low-level danger of frontier life accumulate over years. Each one is survived, becomes part of the family history, shapes how they approach future challenges. Julia's illness becomes the winter we almost lost her. Marcus's broken arm from falling off the wall fortifications becomes the time he learned walls are not for climbing. Gaius's sword wound from the patrol ambush becomes the month Marcia learned to change bandages and drain infected wounds. The accumulation of survived crises creates resilience, but also weariness. How many times can you face potential disaster before the constant stress wears you down? How many near misses before your luck runs out? These questions don't have good answers, so frontier families generally don't ask them. You face each crisis as it comes, survive it if possible, and move forward because the alternative is giving up. Not every crisis is survived. Not every patrol returns intact. Twice in the 3 years Marcia has lived at the wall, she's watched funeral processions for men from Gaius's unit. Men she knew. Men whose wives she speaks with at the well. Men whose children play with hers. The first time, the widow was young, maybe 20, with a toddler and pregnant with a second child. She remarried within 2 months to another legionary, a practical necessity rather than romance. Widows with children can't afford sentimentality. The second time, the widow was older, her children grown. She left the vicus entirely, returning to her family in Gaul if the rumors were accurate. These funerals are reminders that the danger isn't theoretical. Men die here. They die in patrol ambushes. They die from disease. They die in training accidents. They die in tavern fights. They die in ways predictable and unpredictable, and their deaths leave holes in the community that are never quite filled, just papered over with time and necessity. Every time Marcia watches a funeral procession, she thinks, that could be Gaius. That could be me following the bier. That could be Marcus and Julia without a father. The thoughts are unavoidable, intrusive, terrifying. She pushes them away because dwelling on them serves no purpose. But they return, especially during the dark hours when sleep eludes her and Gaius is on patrol beyond the wall. For those who lived through the war years, the 1940s, when every knock on the door might be a telegram, when gold stars in windows marked homes that had lost sons, this particular fear will be intimately familiar. The knowledge that someone you love is in danger and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it except wait and hope. That powerlessness is corrosive, eating away at peace of mind, making every separation potentially permanent. Military families develop coping mechanisms. Some women become fatalistic. If it happens, it happens. No point worrying about what you can't control. Some become obsessively superstitious, wearing lucky amulets, making daily offerings to protective gods, developing elaborate rituals they believe keep their men safe. Some simply refuse to think about it, pushing the fear down deep where it can't surface during waking hours, though it emerges in nightmares. Marcia's approach is practical activity. She stays busy. When worry threatens to overwhelm her, she finds a task requiring concentration, mending that needs careful stitching, accounts that need balancing, a floor that needs scrubbing. Physical labor and mental focus leave less room for fear. It's not perfect. The fear still finds her during quiet moments, but it's functional, which is all she needs. Despite the fear, despite the hardship, despite the uncertainty, life continues forward. Children grow and learn. Skills are passed down. Plans are made for futures that might never arrive, but must be prepared for anyway. This is perhaps the deepest form of hope, continuing to invest in the future, even when that future is uncertain. Marcia teaches Julia to spin thread, knowing Julia might grow up to be a military wife like her, might face the same fears and challenges, might stand watch over her own sick child in a cold frontier dwelling someday. But the alternative, not teaching her, not preparing her for the life she'll probably lead, is worse. So the skills pass from mother to daughter, generation after generation. Marcus learns his letters and his tactics, preparing for the military career that seems almost inevitable. Gaius teaches him when he can, showing him sword grips and formation principles. The Legion's youth auxiliary accepts boys as young as 12 for preliminary training. Marcus has 4 years before that decision must be made, but everyone already knows what it will be. The rare evenings when everyone is home, healthy, and safe take on special significance. They're not particularly remarkable in content. A meal, some conversation, children playing while parents handle domestic tasks. But they represent the baseline that military families fight to maintain. This is what you're protecting when you stand watch on the wall. This simple domestic peace. Gaius talks about his day in the edited way soldiers do, mentioning routine details, skipping the dangerous parts Marcia doesn't need to hear and wouldn't want the children to absorb. Marcus talks about his progress with letters. Julia shows off the uneven thread she spun today. Marcia listens, comments, keeps the conversation flowing. To an outsider, this would seem unremarkable. Just a family eating dinner. But in the context of frontier military life, it's precious. Gaius could be on patrol, Julia could still be sick, Marcus could have gotten into trouble. Marcia could be managing alone. That none of these things are true right now is a small miracle worthy of acknowledgement, even if that acknowledgement is unspoken. Late at night, when Gaius and the children sleep, and Marcia has a few minutes to herself before exhaustion claims her, she thinks about the future. not with concrete plans. Frontier life teaches you that plans are fragile things, but with hopes and dreams that exist in the conditional tense. If Gaius survives to discharge, still 12 years away, they might settle somewhere warmer. Maybe southern Gaul, where she grew up, maybe even Italia if they save enough. He'll get his land grant, his veteran's pension. They could farm, or set up a shop, or live quietly in a small town where danger doesn't lurk beyond a wall. If Marcus joins the Legion, as seems likely, maybe he'll be stationed somewhere less harsh than Britain. Maybe Spain, or Africa, or the eastern provinces. Somewhere the climate doesn't actively try to kill you. If Julia grows up and marries, probably to a legionary, given the limited options, maybe she'll have an easier life than Marcia has had. Maybe she'll be stationed near a city with access to real markets and real bathhouses and society beyond a frontier military settlement. These conditional hopes sustain her through the difficult days. They're not certainties. Frontier life offers no certainties, but they're possibilities. Things to work toward, reasons to endure. The alternative to hope is despair, and despair is non-functional. You can't raise children, manage a household, and support a soldier while despairing. So you maintain hope, even when circumstances don't warrant it. You envision better futures, even when present realities suggest they're unlikely. You continue forward because stopping isn't an option. This is the psychological survival strategy of frontier families across the empire. Hope for better. Prepare for worse. Handle today's problems without borrowing tomorrow's troubles. It's not philosophically sophisticated, but it works well enough to maintain functional lives in difficult circumstances. Conclusion: the forgotten foundations. As dawn breaks over Hadrian's wall for another day, the cycle begins again. Marcia will wake to the cold, revive the fire, fetch water, prepare meals, manage children, handle the endless domestic tasks that keep a household functioning. Gaius will stand watch on the wall, or train recruits or patrol beyond the frontier, doing the visible work of empire. And historians, writing centuries later, will record the emperor's names and the battles fought and the policies enacted. They'll note that Hadrian built a wall across Britain. They'll document troop movements and military campaigns. They'll analyze political decisions and economic systems. What they won't record, what they've never recorded, are the thousands of women like Marcia who made those grand historical narratives possible through daily domestic labor. The children raised in the wall's shadow. The meals prepared, the clothes mended, the water fetched, the fires maintained. The fear managed, the crises survived, the hope maintained despite evidence suggesting it might be misplaced. This isn't to romanticize the hardship. Frontier life was brutal. Many children died before reaching adulthood. Disease was rampant. Winters were harsh. Safety was never guaranteed. Women like Marcia had limited choices, constrained lives, and faced constant danger and deprivation that would horrify modern sensibilities. But within those constraints, they built lives. They created communities. They raised families. They developed coping strategies and support networks. They maintained civilization, Roman civilization transported to the edge of empire through sheer determined effort. The bread Marcia bakes isn't mentioned in histories, but it fed the legionaries who held the frontier. The clothes she mends aren't cataloged in archaeological reports, but they kept soldiers warm during British winters. The children she raises aren't named in imperial records, but they became the next generation of the frontier society. Archaeologists excavating Roman frontier sites find the material remains of this life. Cooking pots and loom weights, hairpins and children's toys, food storage jars and decorative items. Each object represents countless hours of use, decisions made, resources allocated. They're the physical evidence of the domestic economy that supported military operations. But objects can't tell you what it felt like to live this life. They can't convey the emotional weight of watching your husband leave for patrol, uncertain if he'll return. They can't capture the satisfaction of a crisis survived or the exhaustion of endless domestic labor. They can't reproduce the complex mixture of pride, fear, hope, and resignation that defined frontier military family life. That's what we've tried to do tonight. Go beyond the objects and the official records to imagine the actual lived experience, not with modern judgments about whether it was good or bad, right or wrong, but with historical empathy for people making the best of difficult circumstances with limited options. There's something profound in the contrast between the monumental Hadrian's Wall, one of the ancient world's most impressive engineering achievements, and the quotidian Marcia's vegetable garden, a small patch of cultivated earth. Both represent Roman determination to impose order on chaos, to create civilization in wilderness. But one is celebrated in history while the other is forgotten. Yet, without the garden and 1,000 small acts of cultivation like it, the wall would have been unsustainable. You can't maintain a military frontier without feeding the soldiers. You can't feed the soldiers without the agricultural and economic infrastructure provided by civilian settlements. You can't maintain those settlements without the domestic labor, primarily performed by women. The grand and the mundane are inseparable. The historical narrative and the domestic story are two sides of the same coin. Understanding one requires understanding the other. The community bonds forged in places like the Vicus at Hadrian's Wall were real and important. Women who helped each other through crises, shared resources during shortages, watched each other's children, provided emotional support during difficult times. These networks weren't formalized or recorded, but they were absolutely essential to survival. For those who remember close-knit communities in the mid-20th century, neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone, where doors were left unlocked, where raising children was a communal project, there's something familiar here. The scale is different, the stakes are higher, but the fundamental human need for community and mutual support transcends time and place. Marcia and Claudia's friendship, built through proximity and mutual need, represents thousands of similar relationships across the frontier. Women supporting women through the unique challenges of military life. That support network is as much a part of frontier defense as walls and weapons, even if it's never acknowledged as such. Ultimately, what drove people like Marcia and Gaius to endure frontier hardship was the same thing that has motivated parents throughout history: love for their children and hope for their futures. They wanted Marcus and Julia to have opportunities, security, a place in the Roman world. Military service, despite its dangers and hardships, offered a path to that security. The calculation wasn't romantic, it was practical. A legionary's son could inherit his father's position, could rise through the ranks with ability and luck, could retire with land and pension and status. A legionary's daughter could marry into the military community, could have the relative security of military family life. These weren't ideal outcomes by any absolute measure, but they were better than the alternatives available to most people in the 2nd century. So families like Marcia's endured. They made the best of difficult circumstances. They built lives worth living within severe constraints. They raised children, maintained homes, supported the military machine that protected and exploited them. And they did all this without recognition, without thanks, without any expectation that history would remember them. Hadrian's Wall still stands nearly 2,000 years later. You can walk along sections of it, touch the stones Roman soldiers placed, imagine the sentries who stood watch on these heights. It's one of the ancient world's most impressive surviving monuments, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a testament to Roman engineering and imperial ambition. The Vicus settlements are gone. The timber buildings rotted away centuries ago. The people who lived there left few material traces, some foundations, some pottery fragments, some coins and personal items. Marcia's name, if she existed at all, is lost to history. Her children's names are unknown. The daily struggles we've imagined tonight left no written record, but those struggles were real. Thousands of families lived variations of this life across Rome's frontiers. Their domestic labor, their community building, their quiet endurance made the empire possible. The wall still stands partly because women like Marcia kept the home fires burning, literally and figuratively. There's something poignant in the contrast between what endures and what's forgotten. The stones remain, the stories fade. Future archaeologists will excavate Roman sites and reconstruct military history, economic systems, political structures, but they'll struggle to access the emotional reality, the daily experience, the human cost of empire. That's why efforts to imaginatively reconstruct that experience matter. Not as perfect historical recreation. We can't know exactly what Marcia thought or felt, but as an exercise in historical empathy, in recognizing that the people who built and maintained Rome's frontiers were fully human, with the same emotional complexity, the same capacity for love and fear and hope and endurance that we have today. The specific circumstances change. The fundamental human experiences, raising children, supporting partners, managing households, hoping for better futures, remain constant across time. Today, people visit Hadrian's Wall as tourists. They walk along the preserved sections, admire the engineering, take photographs. They might visit the reconstructed fort buildings, see the displayed artifacts in museums, read the interpretive plaques. What they're less likely to encounter are the human stories. The museum might have a display about daily life, but it's difficult to convey the emotional weight of frontier existence through pottery fragments and reconstructed rooms. You can see the objects people used without understanding the lives they led. That's the gap we've tried to bridge tonight, moving from objects and structures to imaginatively reconstructed experience. Taking historical evidence and asking, what did this feel like? What were the emotional stakes? How did people navigate these challenges? It's not perfect history in the academic sense. We're speculating about internal experiences that left no direct evidence. But it's essential history in the human sense, recognizing that past people weren't just inhabitants of ruins and creators of artifacts, but living, feeling human beings who dealt with challenges not entirely different from our own. Those who remember grandparents or great-grandparents who lived through the Depression, who served in the World Wars, who endured hardships that shaped them profoundly, you might recognize something of that dynamic here. The challenge of understanding past experience that we haven't lived ourselves. The importance of trying anyway, of using imagination and empathy to bridge the gap between then and now. The specifics of frontier Roman Britain are distant from contemporary life, but the fundamental human experiences, love, fear, hope, endurance, the struggle to create decent lives under difficult circumstances, these aren't distant at all. They're universal, connecting us across millennia to people like Marcia and Gaius and their children. As you drift off tonight, perhaps the image to carry with you isn't the wall itself, impressive as it is, but the small vegetable garden behind a timber dwelling, the fire coaxed to life before dawn, the water carried from the well, the child tucked into bed with a whispered prayer for safety, the soldier's hand squeezed in silent goodbye before patrol. These small, domestic, unrecorded moments are the foundation everything else rests on. The grand historical narratives, empires rising and falling, walls built and abandoned, battles fought and won, all depend on the quiet endurance of people maintaining homes, raising families, hoping for better. Marcia and Gaius, if they existed, are forgotten. Their children's names are lost. Their specific struggles left no written record, but they were real, or people very like them were real. And their daily labor, their love and fear and hope, their quiet determination to survive and perhaps thrive, this is the true foundation of history. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you're comfortable in ways Marcia never was. Your home is warm without constant effort. Your water comes from a tap. Your children are protected by medicine. Marcia couldn't have imagined. Your life, however challenging it might feel, is safer and easier than hers by orders of magnitude. But the fundamental experiences, loving your family, facing uncertainty, hoping for better, enduring difficulty with determination, these haven't changed. You're connected to Marcia and countless others like her through shared human experience, even though the specific circumstances differ dramatically. The past isn't a foreign country, it's the foundation we stand on. The struggles of people like Marcia built the world we inherited. Their quiet endurance, their daily labor, their love and hope and determination, these created the paths we walk today. So as sleep claims you, perhaps spare a thought for the forgotten women of the frontier. The military wives who held households together while their husbands stood watch on distant walls. The mothers who raised children in dangerous places, hoping for better futures. The women whose names are lost, but whose labor made empires possible. Their fires have long since gone cold. Their voices have fallen silent. But their legacy endures, not in monuments or written records, but in the continuation of human endurance, hope, and love across generations. Sleep well. And remember, you too are building the foundation others will stand on, even if they never know your name. The past whispers to us, if we're willing to listen. Tonight, we've listened. And in listening, we've honored lives that deserve remembering, even when history forgot to write them down. Rest now. The wall still stands, the stories continue. And tomorrow, the cycle begins again.